Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast, powered by Support Now. It's been a minute since I've done a podcast, so I'm really excited to be back in the seat. This is, as I often say, my favorite part of the job is getting to sit down with moms that I just find inspiring and impactful, and someone that can leave you feeling better than the way that you stepped into this podcast. Today, I'm joined by Martha McGeehon. She not only is a mom, she's also the founder of an incredible nonprofit called Just Enduring that we will get into in just a bit. But Martha, as I often do, I would love for you to provide a little bit of backstory on kind of what led you to this space. I guess I should provide a little bit of context. Just Enduring is specifically supporting families that are navigating grief of losing a child from infancy through adulthood. And so that seems really heavy. And so oftentimes there's a why behind someone wants to start something like this. And I'd love for you to share what got you here.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a mom of three. I live in just outside St. Louis, Missouri, born and raised in the Midwest. And my oldest daughter, Campbell, is 9 in the 3rd grade. And then our middle daughter is Everly. And we'll talk more about her specifically. And then we have a son, Jack, who is 5 and will start kindergarten in the fall. So obviously very busy in the thick of motherhood. And so what really brought us to meet Jordan and Support Now is Everly's story. And she was born in April of 2018 and no complications, no concerns. And then just about 16 weeks, I dropped her off at daycare. And then that afternoon, I got a phone call from her daycare provider that she was non-responsive and that they couldn't wake her up from her nap. And that's really where our nightmare began. And ultimately, they were never able to revive her, and she passed away on August 14th of 2018. And so since 2018, we've really been navigating life as bereaved parents while also raising 2 other pretty great little humans.
Your story just it gives me chills. I feel like as moms, when you drop your kids off at school, there's a number of feelings that arise. Sometimes it's a little bit of joy that you're leaving your child and so you can move on to other things. Sometimes it's fear and sometimes it's guilt. I simply can't imagine what it must have felt like to get that call. When you go back to that moment, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think, at first it was just mostly shock and confusion. And I was working at home that day and my husband had just happened to come home early that day. So it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. He typically doesn't work from home. He works in an office and was just happened to come home early for something and had literally just walked in the door 5 minutes before I got that phone call. And it was one of those situations where I saw her name pop up on my phone and thought, well, this is weird. She literally never calls me. Right. Even if it's, we need more diapers or something like that, she'll just text me. I don't think she's ever called me. So, that was my first thought was well, this is weird. And then I could tell in her voice that she was, really hysterical. So, and then just confusion about where is she? What are we doing? Where are we going? And then I remember thinking once we found out that, she was in the ambulance on her way to the hospital and that we got in the car and headed to the hospital. And I remember just thinking over and over, she's with professionals. They're going to figure this out. Everything's fine. They're going to wake her up. It's just, something weird happened. And then even those first few moments. So once we got to the emergency room, we were led to a room really and left kind of all by ourselves, which is a whole nother story. And as they came in, they first sent in a nurse who just started asking us some questions about her history and her information, and then just kept repeating to us, your daughter is really sick. And I just thought, no, she's not. I just saw her a few hours ago. She's perfectly healthy. She's not sick. But still feeling okay, they're using the word sick. This is solvable. This is recoverable. The professionals are going to figure it out. And then finally, they did take us back to see her. And I remember we turned the corner into the emergency room and there was a police officer standing right outside her door. And almost as soon as I saw the look on his face, my stomach just dropped. And I was like, oh, this is really bad. And then we turned and walked into her room. And all I could see from the way her bed was sitting was the top of her head. And there was just something about it that I knew as soon as we walked in that room that she was gone. They were still trying to resuscitate her. But, that mom instinct and that mom intuition, I again, could only see the top of her head, but I just knew. And yeah, from that point, it really is just navigating a complete and utter nightmare, the worst possible thing that we can think of as moms. And
Unbelievable.
yeah,
It's really
the
unbelievable.
story unfolds and gets even more crazy from there, and just which is kind of what brought us to meet you, why we founded Just Enduring. But yeah, that ultimate just unreal, like this can't possibly be real. We're just gonna, like, this is a nightmare. We're gonna wake up and it's gonna be different tomorrow. And ultimately, that wasn't what happened.
And what did you find out afterwards? What reasons were you given? What diagnosis?
Yeah, so we unfortunately we're not given a whole lot of information. Ultimately, unfortunately, as we've learned in the last 7 years, even a SIDS diagnosis it's more complicated than you might imagine if you're not in this world. And so ultimately, we were told that it was suffocation. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that it truly was SIDS. Just what I know about her and what I've learned in my own personal research about SIDS, I think that's truly what it was. I think that again, there's a lot of miscommunication about what SIDS is, and we were lucky enough to be paired or to find an organization called Roberts Foundation out of Boston Children's Hospital that does research. They're one of the leading researchers on SIDS and sudden infant child deaths, which are kids over the age of 1 who just kind of have this situation where they go to sleep and wake up and then there's no other explanation for it. And being matched with them really has helped give us some peace about what we heard from the coroner's office. In the state of Missouri, at least, the coroner won't give you a SIDS diagnosis if there's any other factors that are present. And in Everly's case, she had a little bit of spit up, and so they declared it suffocation on that spit up. But again, I think ultimately, from what we've learned, that it really was probably SIDS.
Man. Martha, how do you possibly pick yourself up from something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think there are a lot of different things, right? We were blessed enough to have a really great support system around us and people who could help us navigate what we needed to do to put one foot in front of the other. Our oldest daughter, Campbell, was 3 at the time. Jack hadn't been born yet. And a lot of it was like, we just knew that we had to be there for her and had to, get up every day and parent her and be the best mom and dad we could be for her. So ultimately, for a long time, she really was that lifeline for us. And finally, we really put our heads together and decided we need to make the experience for other parents different than our experience was. Kind of alluded to earlier, was our experience in the hospital was really unfortunate and just really terrible. We left the hospital with absolutely no information about what to do next, how to process the loss of a child, how to tell our 3-year-old that her sister had died, any information about support resources and grief resources. We really ultimately left with nothing. And my husband and I have a background in social work. My husband is very a problem solver, will figure anything out if he has to. And so we were able to do the research that we needed to do to figure out how to keep going.
Yeah.
And the more time, the more conversations we had, we were like, not everyone has the resources we have, and not everyone has the ability to figure this out. And so we need to do something, because we can do something to make it a little bit easier for people as they're navigating this awful situation. Because we learned as we talked to more and more parents that our situation wasn't unique. Unfortunately, a lot of families leave the hospital without much support, and they're just left to figure out how to navigate life on their own.
I'm so curious. Obviously I care deeply about supporters showing up for families in these moments of crisis. What were the things that people did for you that were meaningful? I just am like trying to put myself in your shoes. And to me, it's like, I would imagine it's really hard for anyone to do anything because it's just such an unbelievable shock that it's hard to process like anything that provides relief. And was there something that people, like, what were the actions or the words that were spoken that gave you hope, that gave you a little bit of light?
Yeah, I think Absolutely, right? Before this happened to us, I would say I was very, where you were, like, I don't know how to talk to people who have been in this situation. I don't know what they need or what to do. And I think we often talk about how, we just as a society don't want to talk about death, but the death of a child is even more so something that we just we don't even want to go there because it's so unfathomable to think about. So we just don't talk about it. And so people don't know how to show up. And I think that that's really, it's both a disservice to the grieving family, but I think it's also a disservice to the people who really do want to show up and want to be there for their friends and family who are going through this and just don't know how. So I think, the things that were most helpful and the things that I, still encourage people to do when they ask me that specific question is literally just show up. Don't try and fix it. Don't try and solve the problem. Just be there. And just one of the hardest things really is in those early days is being alone, because then all you have to do is think about your reality. So, just showing up saying, I'm running to get a coffee. I'm going to bring it by. I can stay or I can go. But like giving the family that opportunity to and don't ask, right? Just say, this is what I'm doing. Because if you asked me, I would have been like, no, we're fine. We don't, I don't want to impose and that sort of thing. And so the people who just were bold enough to be, or even like, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to buy some snacks for Campbell, and what else do you need? Those were really the most helpful gestures. And again, not to say that the people who reached out via text and checked in regularly were also, they were helpful. And it's nice to know that people are still thinking about you and wanting to do or say something that is helpful. But in those moments, just doing things that you would want done for yourself. Think about, even if you're not in such a serious situation as this, but if you were sick or had a broken leg and just couldn't get out of the house, what's something that you would want someone to do for you? Do that for these people in this situation. And those are really the most helpful things.
Yeah. What was it like to tell Campbell? I mean, you talk about her. It sounds like she was a pretty mature 3-year-old.
Yes.
Tell me more about that experience.
So, she was a very fresh 3-year-old. So it was about 10 days after her 3rd birthday. But yes, she was a very mature 3-year-old, very verbal, could understand. And so we knew like this wasn't something that we could just ignore with her. We had to address it head on, knowing just her own personality. And so we were lucky enough to have some friends who were able to pick her up. So she happened to be at a different daycare because she had just started preschool, which again, thankfully, that I think in hindsight was also a huge blessing that she was not there when this happened. So a friend picked her up from daycare and then actually was able to, she spent the night at their house to give us some time to really figure out, how do we tell a 3-year-old that her sister has died and is never coming back? Because again, that was, no one at the hospital could help us with that. My husband kept asking, like everyone that walked into the room, it was less about like, what do we do? And more like, how do we help her? Like, she is our number one priority at this point. The rest of it we'll figure out, but we need help for her.
Yeah.
And again, we got nothing from the hospital. And after spending some, time talking about it and trying to figure it out, my husband had the brilliant idea to call another nonprofit that we had both volunteered with that supports kids with developmental disabilities. But he was like, someone in this organization is going to have a family that they can connect us with. So we called our contact there, and it was actually ended up being someone on staff who 20 years ago had almost an identical experience to ours, had a 3-year-old at home. Her youngest daughter died of SIDS, and she really walked us through like, here's what you say, here's how you do it. Very concrete. Don't talk about the fact that she was asleep. Just be very concrete. And so when Campbell came home from school the next day, we sat her down and we said, Everly died last night. And she, in all of her 3-year-old wisdom, looked at us and said, I'm really going to miss her. And again, I still have no idea how she had any idea that like put those pieces together. She never asked us what death meant. And so in some ways, I feel really fortunate that we didn't also have to explain that piece to her. But all that to say, so this 7 years down the road, we're still processing with her on a very regular basis. She still regularly talks about Everly and asks questions about Everly. And as she gets older, she's processing it in different ways. And I think really now starting to put pieces together that she couldn't at 3, right? And so that's also sometimes hard because her grief is very different than ours and changes very regularly in ways that adult grief just doesn't. So navigating that, and if you've had a 3-year-old, you also know that 3 is a really hard age. And so we had to untangle, like, is this her just being a 3-year-old or is this her processing what happened? And that was a really hard year, just navigating that piece of life with her.
So she's 10?
She's almost 10, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it's almost you're grieving together. You're just grieving in different ways. In some ways, does it help you to have to like confront it? Kids typically can be more forward with their grief. Like they'll just say things that sometimes adults tend to like shield in terms of words. Have you found that like having to help her has therefore helped you kind of be more open or more transparent? Or was that not something you struggled with at all?
Yeah, well, I think absolutely. I would say for the most part that hasn't been a huge struggle. We've been really open about our loss, and we talk about her regularly, and it's not something that we shy away from. But I think even with that, she has still helped us navigate what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think one of the hardest questions that you get as a lost parent is, how many kids do you have? And knowing how to answer that question, and the answer, we've come to a place where the answer varies depending on who is asking the question. But for Campbell, the answer is always the same. When people ask her how, if she has any brothers and sisters, she will always answer, I have a little sister and I have a little brother. And most of the time she says, and my little sister is dead. And, as you can imagine, as adults, like that, most adults don't know how to deal with that. And we have had to, just like be, she'll say it to people at the park, and we're like, yep. And they'll turn and look at us and be like, is she serious? And, yep. She had a little sister and her little sister died. And, and so it's also, I think, helps us just be, not shy away from it in those awkward situations and just confront it head on, regardless of how awkward the other person is in that situation. Where I, as a parent, wouldn't in that situation bring that up. But for her, that's her reality, and she doesn't know any different. So why should she hide that from anyone?
Well, and and you alluded to this, everything I've ever read and learned about grief and talking to children about it in particular is how important it is to be very clear that you're not to speak into ambiguous terms. And, culturally, that's not something you see often. Culturally, it's very gray. They're in a better place, heaven, and there's nothing wrong if that is what you choose to do. And the experts would say, if you want to really hit this head on, you're best to just say what actually happened.
Yes.
They died.
Yeah.
And that feels so harsh because, as you know, this country in particular, we're just so behind in terms of being very honest and literal because it's hard. And because, like you said earlier, people want to fix it and you're not going to.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's this really interesting, the number of things that we are willing to use the word dead with, like, and I catch myself, especially when I'm in conversations with either of my kids, like the battery is dead. And so then we throw the battery away. But like, that's very different than when a person dies, right? And so like navigating those nuances with kids is difficult. But I think you are absolutely right. Like with kids, the more concrete you can be, it helps them process and makes them less scared, right? If we were to have told her, your sister fell asleep, took a nap, and never woke up, that's going to make these other kids terrified to ever go back to sleep. Or, she was sick. Then anytime they get a cold or, a runny nose, that's where their brains are going to go.
Yeah.
And so, we were, again, fortunate enough to find someone who walked us through that really early on before we even had our first conversation with her. And so we've been very intentional about what language we use and how we use it with our kids. And I think it's made a huge difference in their ability to process Eberly's death.
How in the world did you navigate the first year or two of Jack's life after an experience like this?
So even making the decision to have third child after she died was really hard.
Yeah.
So it wasn't pregnancy loss or it's still, even just making that decision, like, we're going to try again. And again, we had the benefit of talking to a friend of ours who their oldest daughter was born with an undiagnosed neurological disorder and passed away at 5. And they have since had 2 sons. And we were having a conversation with them and basically asked them that same question, like, how do you even find the courage to try again? And her answer to us was, even if there's a 25% chance that my next kid is going to have the same disease that she had, I'm willing to do it all over again for the 75% chance that we're going to get to have another kid and get to have, be a parent again. And that was really profound to us. And we really wrestled with that because we also knew that we didn't want Campbell to be an only, to grow up as an only child. And so even that decision was tough. And then once we made that decision, pregnancy was not easy, but I had a really great support system, a medical support system. My OB, we had monthly ultrasounds from the very beginning, just so that we could, she could give me that peace of mind, and we knew that everything was okay. We did end up, so Jack was born, everything seemed smooth, and then right after he was born, I was in the room alone with him, and I was trying to take a nap and quickly realized, I can't sleep. There's no way I can sleep with him in this room if no one else is here to watch him.
Yeah.
And so I sent him to the nursery at the hospital. And then unfortunately, there was an incident in the nursery where the nurse that was in the nursery with him thought he had a seizure. And so we lived through a micro nightmare with all of that. We got a, trip to the NICU. In hindsight, however, that trip to the NICU, I think, made the transition home with him easier than it ever would have been had we not gone to the NICU. Ultimately, he was perfectly fine, but they ran every single test they possibly could have run. We were there for about a week. And so I also got that first week of pregnancy or postpartum, regardless, is not fun for anybody. And I also got that with the best care in the world for Jal. And so again, in hindsight, I think that really helped us make that transition home without being quite so terrified.
Yeah.
In the moment, it was obviously one of the scariest things that, has happened to us. And again, I think that there were I know there were still moments where I would wake up in the middle of the night, terrified that he had stopped breathing, and, all of those things that we do as new parents anyways, but we're just, hyper alert of.
Yeah.
And it was just, taking one foot in front of the other again and just trusting that, we did all the right things the last time, and something bad still happened. And so all we could do this time is all of the right things again and just trust that it wouldn't turn out the same way.
Martha, this story is, thank you. Thank you so much for just sharing everything. You're actually the first guest I've had on that had an experience with SIDS. And as you know, it is something that moms are very aware of as a potential outcome. And it's a very scary thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very scary thing. And to see you and your husband find a way forward is truly amazing. And to the degree that I don't mean this in any condescending way, I'm so proud of you. That's so amazing. And then to build this beautiful nonprofit in addition to adding to your family, it's so incredible. And so I think that moms oftentimes underappreciate or undervalue just how much they do. And in this case, you should hear it again and again that you should be extremely, extremely proud of yourself and the example you're setting for your kiddos. As we wrap up, though, I would love for you to share, if someone is listening that knows someone, or God forbid, they are in this season of life, where can they find out more about Just Enduring?
Thank you. And thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate that too. So, our mission at Just Enduring really is to provide those immediate resources and help parents find other parents who are experiencing the same thing, to help navigate those early days of grief and figure out how to navigate those milestones that we talked about, because we had to do it alone. And it's, again, it's our passion project. It's, how we navigate life without Everly. And so if you are in those situations, or if you've got a family or friends, we do also have a lot of resources specifically for family and friends about how to support your network who's going through something like this. All of that information is on our website, which is just justinduring.org. And then all of our socials are at justinduring. So, you can also on our website get in contact with us specifically, or like I said, through our socials, if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with any of us who have navigated this life and been through this.
Martha, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I'm so grateful and hopeful to have many more conversations with you about how we can both serve families in these difficult moments. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for everything you're doing to help support families going through the worst days of their lives too.
Thank you.